This podcast is sponsored by nobody. Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror and sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now today I will be talking to a legendary character actor, and I am talking about Jordan Rhodes. Jordan, oh my God, was on so many great TV shows back in the 60s, 70s. And I'm talking about shows like Green Acres, Then Came Bronson, Adam 12. He was in the pilot for The Night Stalker and the original Wonder Woman with Kathy Lee Crosby. And he was on the streets of San Francisco. He played Jerry Billings on that show. He was on Battlestar Galactica. And he was in Charles Bronson's classic movie, Mr. Majestic, celebrating its 50th anniversary. It's probably the most underrated movie Bronson ever did. And I can't wait to have him on today. He has a memoir out called The Life of a Blue-Collar Actor. And he's on the radio in New York. I'll find out more information about that. And I just can't wait. I love talking to my character actors. And it's been 5 days since Kristen died. I just been a basket case the entire week. You know, when I'm not doing interviews, I'm doing research and I'm crying because it's just so awful that she passed away. I feel so blind in some ways. Like, even though, you know, it was just a month that she was sick before she passed, it's just like, I wish I just could have, you know, given her a squeeze on Facebook and said, hey, how you doing, you know, before it happened. You know, she probably wouldn't have responded, but at least, you know, I'd feel some comfort. And I don't know, I'm just talking out of my ass right now, but I just really wish I could have talked to Kristen before she passed one more time, because the last time we talked was last July. But everything happens for a reason. So yeah, here is my interview with Jordan Rhodes.
Hello.
Hey Jordan, welcome to the show, sir. How are you today?
Tommy, I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I am fantastic, sir. I can't tell you what an honor this is. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Hey, listen, it's my pleasure.
Absolutely. So, going back in time, did you gravitate toward acting early on in your childhood?
No, I never really. My relatives used to always, because I believe you probably read my book, so I think my background was we were pretty poor, and so the summers I used to spend working on my uncle's tobacco farm down in North Carolina, and of course he was a sharecropper. He didn't own the farm, and I used to do that, and of course
Right.
all of my free moments and everything, I loved to play cowboys and stuff like that. And as I got a little older, about 10 or 11, and I was able to drive the tobacco sled, I used to do a lot of that stuff. And of course, they all said that I was, you know, their theory was that Jordan was kind of crazy, but he was okay. But my first episode into the acting profession was when I was in the 7th grade. I certainly never really thought anything about that. And there was a guy in the area, they're actually all over the states, but in North Carolina, he toured around with this operetta about Tom Sawyer. Mm-hmm. And he went to 7th grade schools, to the 7th grade, and had the 7th graders perform this. So he came to the 7th grade where I had just actually, we moved so much, I was always a new kid in school, and I was the new guy there. And of course, I had made some comments when I first came into the room. I guess it was all your defense mechanism when you're a young kid. And anyway, he came into the room and he had the Tom Sawyer play. And my teacher, Mrs. Valentine, she said, yes, she said, we're going to do this, and I've got the perfect Tom Sawyer. And of course, she said it was going to be me. And I, of course, said, I ain't going to do no dumb play. So that was my comment. But she was very smart. I had my eye on a young girl in my class whose name was Rebecca. And of course, the teacher, Mrs. Valentine, decided that she was going to give I think the character in the play is either Betsy or Rebecca, and if I've got the two names mixed up, the girl that I was sweet on had the other name. Anyway, she said she was going to cast her in the role of Becky. That's right, Becky. It's Tom Sawyer and Becky.
Mm-hmm.
So her character name was Becky. Her real name was Betsy. And so she said she was going to cast her as Becky, and then she said, I'll make a deal with you. If you will rehearse down in the room here, if you'll go and rehearse all the musical numbers, because it was an operetta, and she said all of that and not miss any rehearsals or anything and do the show, I won't give you any homework. So I thought, get to work with this girl I'm sweet on and no homework. I guess I'm in show business. So that was my first outing when I did the play of Tom Sawyer, and I was Tom Sawyer, and still remember one of those songs from that show. And that was really, I don't know, Tommy, that was kind of the first time that I discovered on stage, I discovered that I could make people, if I did something a certain way, I could make the audience go, oh, or if I did something else, they would laugh. I guess that's where the bug bit me, if there's such a thing.
Right. And then, after high school, did you attend college?
No. In fact, this was really grade school. This was the 7th grade. When I got into high school, Mrs. I'm trying to think of her name right now. I really liked the teacher, and she always tried to get me involved in the drama class there in high school. But I, unfortunately, as I said, we were kind of skinny on the money thing. So in high school, I was in a program called DO. They had a DO program and a DE. One was diversified education, the other was diversified occupation. And that meant that you went to school until noon. School in those days started at 8 in the morning. You went to school at noon, you got out at noon to go to your job, and that's kind of what your deal was. So in those days, this might interest your listeners, but in those days, I had left home at a very early age. My dad had a drinking problem, and I really kind of got tired of this situation that was going on. So when I was about 13 years old, I went and moved in at my grandmother's boarding house. My grandmother had a boarding house there in Durham. And I went and moved in there, and of course, when I was in high school, I was still living there. And in those days, they didn't have funds. You had to buy your school supplies. I mean, of course, they had books, but your pencils and rulers and things and all of that stuff and lunch, you had to pay for that yourself. So not to pull on anybody's heartstrings, but when I was in high school, which there started in the 10th grade. Junior high went to the 9th. High school was 10, 11, 12. So when I was in high school in the 10th and 11th grade, my deal was in the beginning, I would get up in the morning about 5 o'clock, and I would go take a paper route. I would come back to the boarding house, my grandmother's boarding house, where I had my own room, of course. I would take a shower and get ready. I would have breakfast. I would go to school at 8 o'clock. I would get out of school at noon. I'd go back to my grandma's boarding house, have lunch, and then at 12:30, I was at a place called Belt Leggett's downtown Durham, where I sold shoes from 12:30 until 5. And then I would get out at 5, go back to my grandma's house and have some dinner. And then I ushered in the Carolina Theater from 6 o'clock until 10 at night. And that was my routine. And of course, it was at the Carolina Theater that I saw a James Dean movie. And I didn't really know what that was that he was doing, but it was something that I said I would sure like to see if I could do it. And shortly after that, of course, James Dean was killed in a car accident, and his Porsche hit that guy in the station wagon. And that news was big news down there, and for some reason, that prompted me to leave. I left North Carolina and went out on my own to Baltimore, Maryland, where I, through just a stroke of luck, wandered into what in those days was called the Hilltop School of Dance and Drama, later became the Baltimore College of Theatrical Art. And I wandered in there to see if I could maybe take some lessons or something. And I don't know, Tommy, the guy asked me to sing something. I sang something, and he had me go to another class, and they asked me to do some movement, some dance. I was not a singer or a dancer, but I did that. And I came out, and lo and behold, they offered me a scholarship.
Wow.
So they gave me a scholarship, and I started attending school there, and still working, full-time in a shoe store. I was selling shoes and going to school basically in the evenings. And they have a theater. They're called the Hilltop Theater, which was in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. And they did plays there and cast me in one of the plays. And lo and behold, I started doing the local theater scene there in Baltimore for the rest of the time I was there. And then through another just strange set of circumstances, a director that had directed me, his name was Bill Bruno. He had directed me there, and he kept telling me, he said, "Kid, you need to go to New York." Then I went to New York, and it scared the hell out of me. I came back. He said, "But you need to go to New York." He said, "You can do something in this profession." And I still was kind of a big fish in a little pond there in Baltimore because I was doing a lot of plays and even did 2 local television things there. But Bill went in the hospital for what was supposed to be a very simple operation, and he didn't tell anybody. It was about some ulcers, and lo and behold, some complications developed, and Bill wound up dying.
Wow.
And for whatever reason, that motivated me, and I left shortly after that, and I went to New York in 1958, and started making the rounds. And I had a friend that had gone to New York that I knew him in Baltimore, and he was living in a 2-room apartment in those days with 2 other guys, and they really needed a 4th roommate because 2 guys kind of in each room. And so his name was Ed, not Burns to get confused with the other guy, but anyway, Ed told me I was coming to New York, and he said, "Well, be one of our roommates." So I went to New York, and I arrived in New York with 1 suitcase and $58.
Wow. Yeah, that was a lot of money in those days.
Oh, yeah, well, it was, it was enough for me to pay my first month's rent, and then, of course, I got a part-time job, and Ed Beers said that he had changed his name to Beers. He had another name which I thought was better than Beers, but for some reason he liked Beers, and he didn't spell it like beer. But anyway, Ed, he went on to become a Franciscan brother, by the way, and he was attending acting classes at the New Theater School, which was it was really, I don't want to say it was a branch of the Actors Studio, because it wasn't, but it was like an offshoot.
Yeah.
And people like Carl Redkoff, all teaching that Stanislavski method. Carl Redkoff and Dr. Isla Motloff, they were teachers there. Stella Adler came in and out a few times, and Evelyn King. And he asked me, he said, that people could come and observe. He said, why don't you come down one night and observe one of the classes? And I said, okay. I said, I can observe. I said, but Ed, I said, I don't have the money. I don't have the money. I can't afford to go. He said, I know, but just come on down and watch one of the classes. And I went down on that night, and I don't know if we believe in, or if I believe in things up above or all of that, but it was just strange. I went down that night, and lo and behold, there was a guy had not shown up with his partner to be her partner in a scene they had been rehearsing in class. And Carl Redkoff was the guy that was running the class, who really became a major force in my life. We became very good friends, years later. But Carl asked me, I was the observer there, he said, would you, be willing to read with her because she doesn't have a partner? And so I said, sure. So they gave me the play, and I don't remember what the play was now, but I read with her, and they seemed, impressed, and Carl had some nice things to say, and he even used me as an example. He said, "Did you notice how he did so-and-so and such and such?" Anyway, long story short, and I'll shut this up, and you can ask me some questions. I got out of the class, and I was headed down, and the people in the administration room there, the office, they called me, and they asked me to come in, and so I went in, and I thought, well, they're going to give me a pitch. And they came down and said, "Jordan," they said, "Carl has just spoke to us and talked to us," and they said, "How would you like to attend class here?" And I said, "Well," I would like to attend class. I said, "But," I said, I can't afford it." And they say, "Well, we would give you a scholarship." And so, lo and behold, I got another scholarship. Mm-hmm. In fact, Ed, my buddy, after I left, and I got the scholarship, I was going to go there. Ed never got mad. He was a wonderful guy, and he just said, "Boy," he said, "that's something. I bring you down here, and you go up there and read one thing," and he said, "I'm paying for these acting classes, and you're getting a scholarship."
Yeah.
And so that's what happened. I got a scholarship and started studying there, and it just from there I kept making the rounds, auditions, and things like that, and got a couple of parts in some plays, and I'm pretty proud of this. I was instrumental in starting. Most people, at least here on the East Coast, here in New York, certainly know about the La Mama Theater, which they have now off Broadway. And La Mama Theater, of course, started as theater in the cafes. That's what it started as. Well, when I was in New York and doing that, I went into there's a little place downtown in the Village, and it was owned by a guy whose last name was Chino, and he had the Chino Cafe. And me and about 3 other actors would go in there when we could get a sandwich or something, and he had this nice little area there in the cafe, and we said to him, "Why don't you let us do some scenes and things here in the cafe?" And he said, "I can't pay you guys." He said, "But if you want to do something," he said, his name was Joe Chino. In fact, people can look him up on the internet today, and he said, you can pass the hat around after you do your things." And we said, "Yeah, we can put a little riser here, put some lights in." So 5 of us, 3 girls and 2 guys, we started what became known as Cafe Chino. And we did scenes in there and even did some original plays in there. And that's not how I got my first summer stock job. I went to audition for summer stock, and in those days they had Eugene O'Neill had a play. Look Homeward Angel was on Broadway, and Tony Perkins was playing the young man in it, and I went up and auditioned for the replacement when they were doing him. But an actor that I became friends with years later and actually worked with, Andrew Prine.
Oh, yeah.
Andrew Prine got the role. I didn't get the role, and but that's basically why I was hired at the summer stock company, and it was called the Playhouse on the Green in Worthington, Ohio, right outside of Columbus. And I basically, when I went and auditioned for them, that was the main thing. That was the main reason they hired me for that season of stock. And I was doing a thing called like Dig Me Man or something like that, an original beatnik play in this Cafe Chino. And I invited the producer and the director after I'd auditioned. I said, I'm doing a show if you guys, since you're here in town, if you'd like to come down and see it. And so they said, okay, great. So they came down that night. And then what's so funny, they called me back later in the week and hired me for the summer stock job. And then they said to me, by the way, Jordan, just so that you'll know, we were set on hiring you when you came in and here and auditioned. And they said, when we came down and saw you in that play in that Cafe Chino down there, we almost changed our mind. So anyway, I got my first. That's how I got my first. It became, quote, a professional. That's how I got my first actor's equity card. Was in summer stock at Playhouse on the Green, and met one of my friends there, John Quincy Adams III, who unfortunately passed away just last year. And Johnny and I were friends. He was my oldest, longest, and dearest friend. Johnny and I had known each other for 63 years.
Wow.
And as I say, and he started out as an actor, but not with much success. But he became a Christian Scientist practitioner and a lecturer because his family. I don't remember. Do you remember an actress named Dodie Goodman?
Of course. Of course.
Oh, Dodie Goodman was his aunt.
Wow.
Yeah. And Dodie was a wonderful person. I mean, she was incredibly talented, and some of your listeners might remember her. You know, she used to play these really goofy roles. And
yeah, she's the secretary that was struck by lightning in Splash.
And in one movie, she was a lady who wore her bra outside her blouse.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, Dodie was Johnny's aunt, and of course they were Christian Scientists. And Johnny became he was a Christian Scientist, but he became a Christian Scientist practitioner, and went on to become a very noted. Your listeners can look him up online. He became one of their biggest lecturers and speakers, and he traveled all over the world speaking on Christian Scientists and that. And of course, he used to come down to North Carolina, and for some reason he would be at places North Carolina, California, where I was, and we would always hook up, and we both played golf. We'd go play golf, or we'd just do things, because when we were young, back when we were, we met in summer stock, and he was still trying to be an actor here in New York. He came to me one day, and I'd gotten a thing from MGM out in California. It was just one of those blast post things. They weren't contacting me directly, but they were contacting young actors and actresses, and they were talking about this program they were going to have. They were going to start another. What in those days they used to have. Actors that would be under contract at the studio, and that had pretty much died out, and they were going to start it back. And so I got that thing, and Johnny came over to my apartment. Now, wait a minute. Let me rephrase that, Tommy. He came over to my one room. I lived in one room on West 70th Street, and he came over one night, and he said, "Hey, Jordy," he said, "Why don't we go to California?" And I said, "How am I going to go to California?" He said, "Well, get one of those U-Drive cars." He says, "There are people that pay for the gas and all that stuff, and you drive their car across country." And he said, "I've looked it up." He said, they give you about 7 or 8 days. He said, "We can drive quicker than that, and then we can have the car out there for a few days and pick up our car coming back." And he talked me into it. Mm-hmm. And so Johnny and I drove, and this was a record until Johnny's son got so tired of hearing these stories. As a young man, he and a buddy of his broke our record, because Johnny and I drove from New York City to Hollywood and Vine in 58 hours.
Wow.
2 days and 10 hours.
Crazy. In 1969, you did an episode of Then Came Bronson. What was Michael Parks like to work with?
I liked Michael. Michael had a strange reputation in California, because maybe you could help me with his name. There was a huge guy that was running everything at Universal.
Lou Wasserman?
Shoot that name at me again.
Lou Wasserman, or he was the head of MCA.
Thank you, Lou Wasserman. And of course everybody in the world was scared to death of him, because he was an absolute shark. And Michael had this reputation as being the only actor that had told Lou Wasserman to go do himself. Yeah. And Michael still was working in California. But I liked working with Michael. I really enjoyed working with him. He was very much a method actor, because I know as knowledgeable as you are, back in the days when I came up, they used to kind of pigeonhole you. Mm-hmm. You would either be a method actor or a technical actor, which to me never made any sense at all, because to me all acting methods are methods of acting. And what they used to like to refer to the English as the technical actors. which is complete nonsense when you start talking about actors like Peter O'Toole and Sir Laurence Olivier, and it can just go on and on and on with those actors. And granted, they were not of the Stanislavski school, which I studied, of course, with Lee Strasberg, Sandy Meisner, Carl Redkopf, Dr. Isla Motloff, Stella Adler, who, by the way, for your listeners, and again, I don't know how long we have today, but Stella Adler was really the one that was responsible for Marlon Brando's career, not Lee Strasberg. Lee took credit for it, but when Marlon got to New York, he met Stella Adler, and Stella Adler actually put him up in their apartment, and he and Stella Adler's daughter became very involved with one another, and Stella Adler, who obviously was also, of the Stanislavski era and all of that, but she was the one that really pushed Brando, and then got Brando to go down and audition for, and of course, he got in the studio, and so even though Lee took credit for that, Stella Adler, she was the one that she was the one that was really responsible for not Brando's talent. I've never. It's like me and my friendship with Sean Penn.
Yeah.
I helped Sean in the very early part of his career. He actually got a play that got him his big agent. But I've always made sure that people understand I don't claim anything having to do with Sean's talent. Sean has incredible talent. Sean's father, Leo Penn, put my career on the map. That's how we became friends, and then that's how I met Sean, and I met, of course, Michael, and then Christopher, of course, the younger brother who, as you know, passed away.
Yeah.
He had a heart attack. He did not die from a drug overdose. He had a heart attack. He was very overweight, and was working real hard on a film project at the time. But anyway, just like I'm not saying, Stella was not responsible for Brando's talent, only responsible for getting him in places and audition and people seeing him and then offering him things, and then him becoming what, to me, for my generation, was one of the greatest American actors, really, of all time.
Right. Then you do Green Acres. Anything stand out about that one?
Well, Green Acres, it's quite funny because I really was supposed to be a recurring character on Green Acres. They brought me in as the veterinarian, and I was pretty new at the time, and I did not know that actors, even stars, used cue cards. I wasn't. I was a New York theater trained actor, so my whole deal was you had to learn the words. you couldn't read them off a board. And of course, good Lord, the star,
Eddie Albert.
Eddie Albert, thank you, Tommy. Eddie Albert, he was really getting his career in high gear when he had Green Acres. So he was doing a lot of other stuff. So when he had his close-ups and things like that, he used cue cards. And I'll tell you a nice story about Cannon, about that actor in a minute too, because you might know he was a radio actor, the actor that played
William Conrad.
Yeah, William Conrad, and a lot of people don't know that William Conrad was Matt Dillon on the radio show. He played Matt Dillon on the radio series.
Right.
But anyway, back to Eddie. He had cue cards, and we were shooting his close-up. We had done my close-up, and we were shooting his close-up. And when you're doing the other actor's close-up, star or not, you're on the side with the camera, and you stay as close to the camera as you can. And he's looking at you doing your lines. In this case, we got ready to go, and he's like looking. He's not looking at me. He's looking to the left of me. So I thought I should move over. So I moved over, and as I moved over, he kind of had to keep moving over. And then finally he stopped the thing and he called the AD over and he said, would you tell this kid? He said, he's getting in front of my cars. I can't see my cars. And so the AD came over to me and said, Jordan, he said, you got to stay right next to the camera. And I said, well, I was just trying to get in his. He said, no. He said, you're getting in his cue cards. And I turned around and behind me, to the left of me, were his cue cards. So he was playing his cue cards, and for whatever reason, Eddie didn't. I guess he wasn't happy with that. So when they came around and they were talking about that, I was going to recur as the veterinarian, Eddie said, let's get somebody else. So that was my thing with that. Back to Bill Conrad for a minute on Cannon.
Uh-huh.
He was such a radio actor that he would do all of his certain close-ups of 2 shows in 2 days by himself on the set with just the camera and the cue cards, not the actor there. They would just change his costume because he was a trained radio actor, so he could do that fine. You seem to know a lot about these shows. It's funny, my wife and I were out having coffee yesterday at a place we go to here in New York, right around the corner from our apartment building. Mm-hmm. And it was really funny because it came up. I had, this sounds so presumptuous or facetious or whatever, but it's not meant to be. I had just done so many shows in my career out there. We were talking. I had forgotten that I did Mod Squad.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't remember that I did Mod Squad, and I was always crazy about Brenda Vaccaro as an actress. I just thought she was great. And I worked with her on a short-lived series called Is There a Doctor in the House? Mm-hmm. And my wife and I were there, and I'd forgotten those things. Of course, I didn't forget Peyton Place because that was the first thing I got when I got out to California and quit it after 6 months, which was probably a mistake. But in those days, I was a serious young actor, and I didn't think the stuff I was doing as the intern in Peyton Place was serious enough. So I quit, and about a month later, after quitting Peyton Place, which I'd been on for 6 months, I was parking cars at a place called the Gallery Room, which was what part of California are you in, Tommy?
Modesto.
Oh, Modesto. Oh, well, hey, it's nice there.
Yes.
Nice. Yeah, Modesto is nice. Of course, I spent most of my career in Los Angeles, and then, of course, when I was doing Streets of San Francisco, I lived in San Francisco.
Yep, that's where I'm from, San Francisco.
I did a play with Barbara Rush and Tom Troop and Carol Cook called Father's Day in San Francisco at the Marines Memorial Theater, which was part of the American Conservatory group there. So I lived in San Francisco for a time, and then I was in San Diego when we were doing the play for a little bit, but I never lived in San Diego. But I did live in San Francisco and, of course, Los Angeles before I moved out of the area and moved up into the mountains where I met Chuck Connors. I moved up into the mountains in the latter part of my career out there. I moved about 2 hours out of L.A., which actually was a mistake because the drive back and forth to L.A. for auditions and things just got to be a point where I didn't want to do it. And so I wound up, back in New York.
Right. Yeah, I'm born and raised in San Francisco. I also lived in Arizona, which is where Angel Unchained was shot. I love that movie. You get a piece of fruit thrown in your face by a biker in that movie.
That's I got a funny story for you about Angel Unchained. Tyne Daly and I have stayed in touch, and we're good friends.
Yeah.
And of course, quite a few years ago, here in New York, she was doing Mame on Broadway, and Tyne she's incredibly talented, and it was so I hadn't seen her in a long time. So anyway, I called up and I got in touch with her through her. I had to first call her manager guy and get him, and got in touch with her and said I want to come see the play, and she said come on, and get my house seats, and she said come back afterwards. So I went to see the play, and then after the play was over, which she was wonderful in, I went backstage, and that's the first time that I met. Her name just escapes me right now. Who? Brooke Shields, my wife, just reminded me. Anyway, it's the first time I met Brooke. was backstage with Tyne and in her dressing room, and Tyne said, "Look," she said, "I got a little thing to go to, a little party thing." She said, "You want to go?" And I said, "Well, yeah." I said, and she said, "Okay, come on." So we're going to this little outing, and just before we get into the apartment, Tyne grabs me by the arm and she says, "Listen, if you tell anybody in here that we did Angel Unchained, I will have you killed."
Love it. That sounds like something she'd say.
So that was fun. And let's see, I don't remember. I think I saw Tyne not too long ago, but the COVID thing really changed everything here in New York, as it did all over the country. But everything kind of really shut down here, because prior to the COVID thing, I still get offered a lot of these smaller roles, but unfortunately, I'm not trying to sound big-headed, but they're really not only just day roles, but you're talking about 6, 7, 8 lines, and I just don't want to do that at this stage of my life, because I've done a lot of better work, and so do that. But the strange thing is that I got a call. This is all before the COVID. I got a call one day from a booker, and he wanted to know if I would do this nostalgia celebrity convention.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so I had never done one, and so I did. I went out and I did it, and of course I didn't get along with that particular booking agent, because I didn't like what he was asking me to do. I was signing pictures for bands for like $25 a pop, and I like to tease my friend Robert Wagner. I like to tease him because I've done a couple of these with him, and he gets $75 for his things, and he also he gets a much larger appearance fee than I do, rightfully so. He's been a movie star his entire life, anyway, the booker came to me one day because the gentleman, I'd signed some pictures for him and his wife, and he had 2 kids there, and he wanted to know if he could take a picture with me. I said, sure. And so we'd taken pictures, and after he walked away, and I'd done that 2 or 3 other times, this booker, the agent, came over to me and said, how much are you getting for the picture? And I said, no, 25 for the one. He said, no, not the ones you signed. That's $25. He said, when they ask to take a picture with you, you got to ask them for $15. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
And he says, Jordan, that's, and I said, no. I said, the guy's he just paid me, he bought 2 pictures. He paid me $50. And he said, he wanted to take a picture with me and his wife and his kids, and I'm going to tell him it's another $15. I said, no, I won't do that. So me and that booking guy, we parted company. And I got another one after that and did some of the really big shows. I did there's one they have in Maryland each year that's it is absolutely huge. And I've met a lot of my friends there. Morgan Fairchild, I met her there. In fact, we did a panel together. And Ed, oh good Lord, his dad was a wonderful actor for years, and he does a lot of work now. I met him there, and I met a couple of the Bond girls there, and some of the other people, and those things were quite good. But the COVID, first of all, shut them down, and I haven't gotten back on that track yet, because I know you and I, this is the first time. We've done some emails, but I am preparing to move out of New York. I'm moving back to North Carolina, where I did the Matlock series, and I did a movie with Joe Don Baker down there, and Lou Gossett, and I did another film in that area. There in Wilmington, because Wilmington they still have a big studio there. It used to be called Screen Gem Studio. It's now CineSpace. Yeah, it's been bought by CineSpace now. And anyway, I've gone down there, and I've met with 2 of the colleges, University of North Carolina, UNCW at Wilmington, and Cape Fear Community College, and I'm going to do some presentations there, because when I was on hiatus from Matlock, I was hired from Matlock out of New York. Leo Penn hired me, and I did that Lieutenant Harmon Andrews for 3 years, and when I was during one of the hiatuses, they asked me to teach at UNCW, which is funny, because I told the guy that called me, at that time. He's since passed away. His name was Philip. I think Pruno was his last name. But he called me up one day at my house. I had a house down there, and asked me if I would be interested in teaching a semester at UNCW called, directing actors. And I said, well, Philip, I said, I would love to teach for you. I said, but I don't have the degrees that you guys require. And he said, Jordan, we've looked at your resume. You have about 5 degrees for what we require. So you're fine, So I went in and I taught. So going back down there, I'm going to, I've already talked to the head lady, Jessica Gaffney. She's at Cape Fear Community College. I've already talked to her. I'm going to do a presentation for her. I do this Papa Hemingway introspective, which is, of course, based on my play about Ernest Hemingway, and it's been filmed, which it won an award for here in New York. And I show that, and then that particular program, which takes, the film's about an hour and 40 minutes is the film. And then after that, I do a Q&A, and the students ask some really wonderful questions, because it's a program that's for actors, writers, directors, even some set designers. Students have attended them when I've done them before, like at the University of Georgia and Sand Hills Community College and some of those places. And I really enjoy that.
Yeah.
So I've got those opportunities down there. I don't know that I will do any film work down there, because usually when they come into Wilmington, they're just casting some really small pickup roles there. But I'm going to direct some plays down there for the Opera House Theater Company. And then at the Thalian Hall, which is the oldest continuously operating theater in America.
Wow.
The Booths performed there. The Barrymores performed there. My wife Lynn and I, we were hired to do Papa, the Man, the Myth, the Legend there when we were touring. We toured with that play for 5 years. And we did that there. And then after we filmed it, someone came up and got us the money, and they said, you can't close it, you got to film it. And so before we did close it down, we just couldn't tour it anymore because people couldn't afford it. And we filmed it with 6 cameras during a live performance at the Odell Performing Arts Center in Brunswick County there in North Carolina. And it played Thalian Hall every Wednesday. They have a cinematique thing, and they play films. And so I have the dubious honor of being the only actor that has ever performed on their stage professionally and then had a film shown there. So they're talking about having a 15-year anniversary there for Papa, the Man, the Myth, the Legend.
Nice.
And so we would show that again and do that. And for your listening audience, if anyone is interested in getting any information, first of all, if there are any young actors or actresses out there, or even parents of those people, my book, The Life of a Blue-Collar Actor.
Which I plugged at the beginning of the show, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Yeah, because it is on, and I try to drive everybody to Book Baby Bookshop or bookbaby.com, because it's on Amazon, and you can get the ebook at Barnes and Noble.
Right.
But the bookbaby.com, Amazon doesn't really pay anything, Tommy. They pay I think I get $2.25.
Yeah.
They sell my book. And on bookbaby.com, I get about $10 when somebody buys my book. And so that's really great. And I'm not to try and just do plugs on your show, but my daughter, when I told her that we want to move out of New York, because New York is just in really bad shape right now. I mean, there's just so much. And I do a little, I don't know if you know this or not, I do a little half-hour talk segment each Wednesday.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, I do that. It's the Liz Calloway Show, which comes live out of Myrtle Beach. But in this day and age, as you probably know better than me, the way they do radio is that you can go on your computer, your laptop, or if you got a bigger computer, you can go on that, and you can go to talk945.com, and you can actually they stream the live broadcast. And so each Wednesday from 9:30 to 10, I do a little segment on her show called On the Road Again with Jordan Rhodes. And her show is the Liz Calloway show. It's her and Nick Summers is her sidekick, or co guy there. And I do that each Wednesday. And of course, it's conservative based, so I get a chance to air my my conservative attitude out. After I do a little bit about whatever I've got going on. Recently, I just finished a pilot here in New York, which we're trying to get to some of the places. Discovery Channel already responded to me on it. Mm-hmm. They told me that I need to have a production company or an agency resubmit it because I got this idea to do a reality series based on working class actors, on all of these actors that you know, and of course you'll remember their names and things, but a lot of the public, they know their face and they know their voice, like me, but they don't necessarily know their name. Mm-hmm. So I thought, let's do a series called Working Class Actors, to where, and I hosted the pilot. I don't want to do the pilot. I've already told Discovery when they came back to me and wanted to know if there were any deal breakers. I said I would prefer that we get somebody like Don Johnson or Rob Lowe, to be the host. Mm-hmm. And then I interviewed 5 actors, and actually 3 actors and 2 actresses, people that are working class actors that people see all the time, and I'm trying to get that done. And then one of the things I'm talking to WECT about down there in Wilmington is, are you familiar with a company called Gray Productions, which is out of Atlanta, Georgia?
No.
Well, they right now are supposed to be the big guys on the block in the South. And I had this idea, and I took it to WECT to do a 1-hour show called Let's Talk Acting, which is not really a news show, but because there are so many theatrical students in that area going to UNCW and going to Cape Fear Community College, I thought if we can get that audience, and then, the public generally loves to hear stuff about acting and film and theater and all of that. Mm-hmm. And so the station, WECT, they really liked the idea, but they said, Jordan, we don't produce shows. So we can get you the time, but you've got to have some production company that will do this. And I said, well, I've got my sponsors, so the money is not a problem with that, because I had a radio talk show down there for 3 years, and I went back to some of those people, and I went to the studio and some other places. So I've got the sponsors for the 1-hour thing. So we're hoping to do that.
Nice.
If I can get in touch with this Gray production company, they've got 117 markets across the United States, and they may have a market that's somewhere out there, close to you guys, but I'm trying to see if we can get that done. So that's not really a pitch, because I don't really have that going yet, but I'm trying to get that talk show done. So the pitch was on my book, and if I don't do this, my daughter will get mad at me. When I told my daughter that we were moving out of New York, I said, because of the pandemic and all of that stuff, we're not really busy right now and all that. And my daughter said, Dad, I'm going to do a GoFundMe. She said, you do a GoFundMe account? And I said, what is that? And she said, you put this, she said, I'm going to do it in your name, but I'm going to put it on. You go to GoFundMe, and you get people that go on there, and if they remember you or like any of your shows or anything, they can contribute money to help you move.
Yeah.
So I have a GoFundMe account, Tommy, and it's called Help a New York Actor and His Wife Escape New York.
I love it. A couple more credits. You were in the pilot episode of both The Night Stalker and the 1974 Wonder Woman. Do any things stand out there?
Yeah, I can tell you, of course, the Wonder Woman thing. Andrew Prine was in that. He was one of the guest stars in that series, and I was the sidekick to Kaz Garris, who was he was like the boyfriend of Wonder Woman. And I really hate, in my entire career, I only did 2 pilots. Wonder Woman was one, and another one was called Sam, Stories About Man, in which Jodie Foster, Jodie Foster played the little girl in. She was about, I don't know, 8, 9 years old at the time.
Yeah.
But the Night Stalker, I really enjoyed that. Working with Darren Gavin was an absolute treat. Darren Gavin, James Garner, they were terrific guys to work with, and I enjoyed that. And they originally were going to have him kind of have a headquarter place there in Vegas, where my character would have reappeared a few more times when he was trying to get information out of a doctor. But unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever, I got another job, and I was not able, to even be available for that.
I love Mr. Majestic. I think it's Bronson's most underrated film. That must have been extraordinary working with him.
It was. I worked with Charlie twice. It was, Mr. Majestic was really it was a terrific job, because in those days, as an actor, if you got a 16-week job, I mean, that was a good job. And that movie, and Charlie was in those days. Charlie had a very rough kind of reputation as not being, an easy to get along with guy, and that was certainly not the case, in the sense of he was a complete professional and really knew his job. And I made friendship with just a terrific guy in there. You would remember him from The Godfather, Al Lettieri.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I have. I guess it's okay, because Al, of course, has passed away, and so is Charlie. So I won't be talking too much out of turn here, but I do have. I guess it's okay for your listeners. I have a couple of. Al Lettieri and I became really good friends, and Al was he was just a great guy. I won't use the language, because this is your show and your.
Oh, you can. You can.
But one of the best stories, it's in my book, that came out of this, is that we had to go to this remote area up in the mountains there in Colorado. And Al liked he really liked his blueberry brandy. And, of course, he had, for the crew, he flew back to California to do some dubbing on The Dawn is Dead. And when he was coming back on a private plane to Manzanita, where we were filming, which there was absolutely nothing there, he went and approached a couple of young ladies of the evening to see if they would like to come back with him, which of course he paid. So he brought them back with him so that they could meet and have some fun with the crew type thing. But anyway, the director decided, because Al liked to, he was a very, he was really kind of a fun-loving guy. But Richard Fleischer, who was the director, and I won't say anything good or bad about Richard, but Richard Fleischer decided that he was going to sequester Al and the actors up in this cabin on this big mountain up in Colorado. And so that's what he did, and he took away all of the, let's say, the not only the brandy, but there was a certain type of cigarette that some of the guys like to partake in, which now is legal in many, many places. Anyway, Richard's idea was to take all of that away from Al Lettieri, so that Al didn't have anything or no kind of fun things to do while being up in this big, huge cabin in the mountains. So there was this one morning when it was quite cool and a lot of dew on the rooftop, which were these wood shakes. And Al was up there, and the scene in the movie is a couple of guys come running out of the house, and Al shoots them.
Yeah.
So he's up there, and Al says to the director as we're getting set up, he says to Richard, he says, "Okay," he shouts down, he says, "Richard," he said, who do I shoot?" And Richard, in his own little perturbing voice that he had, looked up at Al and says to Al, who's going pretty much crazy anyway, he's been up there about 6 days with nothing up to Al Lettieri and he says, well, Al, if you had read the script, you would know who you were going to shoot.
Yeah.
Well, well, you can imagine that didn't go over really well, and so Al shouted back down, and I will not use the language,
Yeah.
but Al shouted back down and said, if I had read this blanking script, I wouldn't even be here. So you tell me who to shoot, and I'll shoot him.
Wow.
And that just rang out through the mountains. I mean, it was absolutely unbelievable.
That scene where Majestic comes home to find bullet holes in his melons is so sad, because that's not just his career, that's his life. You know, you really feel bad for him.
Yeah, and that was some scene when they were shooting up those watermelons. I mean, boy, that was some scene, and that was an interesting place to film, because it was always cold in the morning. Then it warmed up, so if you had on long johns or whatever, by about 11 o'clock, you had to lose them. And then, of course, as you know, when you do a film, then you work well into, the evening. And as it got into the evening hours, after 5 and 6 o'clock, it would get cold again. And that was pretty much it. But I made some nice friendships on that thing. Linda Crystal was one. Al Lettieri. Al and I stayed in touch for years, and a lot of people didn't know, Tommy, at that time that Al, he really was more than on top of the world, because not only did he have The Godfather, which he was incredible in, and he had done The Don is Dead, but hardly anybody knows about Al's career over in Italy. He spoke Italian fluently, but he wrote screenplays over there. He was a screenwriter over there. He was an actor over there. He did a lot of films in Italy. So that's stuff that here in the country, people don't know about him. And just a quick little story about Charlie. Charlie Bronson. As I said, I didn't have much. I could literally remember all the dialogue I had with Charlie on Mr. Majestic, because Charlie was, he was very much within himself and that kind of thing, and he always would kind of take his chair and move away from everybody else. So when Sean came to me and wanted to hire me for The Indian Runner, and of course, Charlie, was in that role. He played the father of David. And so they came to me, and I got the role, which was a terrific role, and it was a much bigger role than after the cut. It finally came out on screen. But anyway, I got the role of Randall, and we were on location, and Charlie was getting ready to come on the set. We'd already been working about, I don't know, 2-3 weeks or something. And so Sean came to me with one of the producers, and they said, that Charlie was coming in, and they said, now, you've worked with him before, Jordan. They said, you get any insight on him? And I said, well, I said, he's professional as he can be. And I said, I got along fine with him. And they said, well, you've been told he gets a little, and I knew what they were going to talk about. And that is that when Charlie used to go and do wardrobe, he didn't like to put on the outfits. He liked to do the coats and then the pants. And he didn't like to do outfits. So I guess the wardrobe person had said he had been a little problem. What a lot of people don't know about Charlie Bronson, Charlie had his jeans tailor-made because he had such a low rise as an individual, and he had the money, so he did that. So anyway, I knew Charlie was coming in, and I knew how he had been on Mr. Majestic, when basically not much dialogue. But at that particular time, Charlie had had an awful lot of tragedy in his life. First of all, you might remember he had lost his wife to cancer. And that was the wife that used to be married to the young blonde guy on The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
David McCallum.
Yeah, he had met, and it was David McCallum's wife, and that's how he met her. And anyway, they became married and had really a great marriage, but she had passed away from cancer. And then one of his sons had died from an OD, had overdosed. And his other son, which really, really took a lot of heart out of Charlie, his other son Charlie wanted his other son to come up and live with him on this estate he had in Connecticut, this big farm place up there. And the kid finally said he would come up, but he wanted to live in a trailer, and he didn't want to live on the property. He would park the trailer right outside the fence, and that's where he would stay. And he did, and then of course he unfortunately shot himself with a shotgun. He committed suicide, and that really, that as any father, that was really bad. So I took a chance. Charlie was coming in, and I wanted to write him a note. So I wrote him a note, and I just said, hi Charlie. You might remember we did Mr. Majestic. I said, I just wanted to welcome you to the set and really tell you and give you my condolences because you've suffered through a lot of tragedy and just really happy to have you on the show and sign my name. And Tommy, I didn't know when Charlie read that if he would come and look me up and tell me to stay out of his business or what do you do, whatever. I had no idea. It was something I wanted to do, so I did it. And I come down from my hotel room the next morning, and my driver isn't there, but two of the producers are there. And they said, come on, we can give you a ride to the set. I said, okay, great. So I'm thinking, what is this all about? I don't have the status that producers pick me up and drive me to the set. So I get in the car, we start driving, and Tom Mount, one of the producers, he turns and he says, I want to thank you for that note that you gave Charlie welcoming him to the show. And I said, well, wait a minute. I said, how do you know about that? He said, we picked Charlie up, and he said Charlie wouldn't stop talking about it. He just said that he'd gotten this note from this actor that he had worked with before, and he said, Jordan, it was really nice of you. We really appreciate it. He said really. So we get to the set, which is on location, and they let me out, and I'm walking over to my trailer, and as I come around the corner of my trailer, there's Charlie coming out of his trailer. He looks over and he says, hey, Jordan. I said, hi, Charlie. I walked over and we shook hands. And said, great to see you. And he said, yeah. He said, I'm glad to be here. Good to see you, too. And that was it. And then by the time that we filmed on that movie, we had a lot of conversation and years later, when he had passed away, someone in Wilmington, I was working in Wilmington at the time, one of the newspapers got wind that I had worked with him and called me up and asked me would I be willing to, be interviewed for a story on Charlie Bronson. And I said, yeah. And so when they interviewed me, I told them, as I always tell young actors, if you have a bad experience with any star and other people ask you about that particular star, don't disclose that. Keep it to yourself and don't lie, but just say, he was okay. And I said, but if you enjoyed the people, I said, I've had so many wonderful relationships with people like Chuck Connors and James Garner and R.J., Robert Wagner and Jill St. John, and the list just goes on and on and on and on. And so I was really happy to do that story about Charlie Bronson because I was able to I guess give some of the other people a different viewpoint of him. And I told him, I simply told him it was on Indian Runners, it was great to work with him again, and had a terrific time and all of that kind of stuff. And and I told him some things that a lot of people didn't know. I know one time when somebody said something to Charlie on Mr. Majestic they said they had seen his weights in the room, and they said, so I guess you got your physique from doing all that working out. Charlie said, no, you get my physique from working at a coal mine when you're 11 years old.
Wow.
And what a lot of people don't know is that Charlie Bronson, when he was 11 years old and his last name was Brushinsky, he basically supported his whole family, which there were quite a few, and he went to work in the coal mines when he was 11 years old. And that's really hard work.
It certainly is. And then you did The Terminal Man.
Oh yeah, that was that was cut pretty good. But The Terminal Man, all that really, I was an interviewer. I was interviewing one of the. I think I was a doctor but I was in the doctors, the interview people there, all of them, and when they were talking about all of this stuff that they were going to be doing with the mind and these things and all that, I had my role was to question a lot of what they were doing, and so that was very short-lived. And
Michael
you're not going to
Crichton.
talk to me about Brace from Battlestar Galactica, are you, Tommy?
Oh, I love Battlestar Galactica. I'm sure you get asked about it a lot.
When I went on my very first one of those nostalgia celebrity conventions, I took about 6 of the Battlestar Galactica because I played this role of Brace on Battlestar, and I personally, for your listening audience and other people out there, I think it's not one of my best it's not one of my best acting roles, I will say, but anyway, it's a very good publicity picture from it, and so I think I took about 5 or 6 of them, and at the table, in no time at all, they were gone, and there was like one left, and the booker came over to me and said, I'll run these out and get some more copies made. So he did. He went out and he made. And that one, whenever I've gone to these conventions, I don't know why, Tommy, but that I sign more of that picture than I sign with any of my other pictures with bigger stars, with better movies, with better roles that I did, Bonanzas and Streets of San Francisco and Matlock and those things. But somebody told me that the Battlestar Galactica people, the Galactics, that they're like the Trekkies.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what it is. I guess that's what they. That's what they like to have.
Absolutely. Were you a contract player at Universal? Because you did a lot of Universal shows.
No, interested on that because when I first got out there, and Leo Penn was the one that got me that wonderful role on my Marcus Welby, which was the one I got a nomination for. Monique James was the head of the contract players there, and she had 2 contract players that she wanted for that role. And Leo Penn had met me through the perseverance of my agent, Ted Wilk at the time, and had read me, and Leo told me at the time he read me, he said, Jordan, he said, he used to call me Kid. He said, Kid, he said, this role is already cast. He said, I want to tell you, he said, I simply saw you because your agent has been driving me crazy. He's been following me all over town, telling me I got to meet you, and I finally said, okay, to heck with it, I'll meet him. And he said, but I want to tell you, you're very talented, and I'm going to have you back. Yeah. So he had me back for this role of Bobby Hershey in this episode of Marcus Welby, which my character was Bobby Hershey, and the young gal, I think her name was Barbara. I think her last name was Hershey, but I'm not completely sure. She was the guest star also on there, and I didn't get guest star billing. I got co-star billing. But it was a terrific role because my character was a young truck driver who had had an accident, and he was a paraplegic from the accident. And the young girl came to this rehabilitation center because she had come down with spinal meningitis, and it was the first Marcus Welby, and maybe the only one that was based on a true story about this young lady who actually, I think she lived in Canada, and she did eventually go on to get married and have kids and everything. But back to the contract player. So Monique James, she knew it was really a terrific role, and she wanted one of her contract players to do it. And Leo really stuck by his guns, and I got it. And I got the role. And then, of course, I went to Leo, not knowing if you could do this or not, and I told him I was going to be in this rehabilitation center down in Orange County. And I asked him, I said, is there any chance that the studio might let me go down there for a couple of days? And I'd like to. And Leo looked at me, and I didn't know Leo's background, but Leo was a fine actor out of New York City. Had been in the theater and everything else, and of course was very much with the Actors Studio and Ben Gazzara and that group of people. And the minute I started saying this, he said, you want to go down there and do some research. And I said, well, yeah, I thought I'd like to learn how to operate the wheelchair, and I'd really like to meet some of the people that are paraplegics. And he said, kid, you want to go down there? Universal Studios is going to pay for you to go down there. You go down there. And that really impressed him. So I went down there, and I did. I went down there, and I spent 3 days down there before the roll and did the roll. So segue now, I finished that, and then I start getting other things there at Universal, quite a few. And one day they called up my agent, and they, Ted Wilk, same guy got me in to see Leo, and they were doing a pilot of a new series, and they wanted me to come in to audition for the pilot. And so I went in and I auditioned for the pilot. And then they went back to my agent and they said they're really interested in him for the pilot, but they would like to put him under contract as one of the contract players, as a contract player here, would he be willing to do that? And so Ted came to me, he called me up, and I went in his office and I got with him. And the only reason I didn't sign the contract, Tommy, to become a contract player is I was working so much in those days that had I signed the contract, which might have been a good thing, I don't know, but if I'd signed the contract, I wouldn't have been making as much money then as I was already making as an actor. And one of the things that the real kind of, I guess, fly in the ointment is that I said to Ted, I said, okay, so I said, but it would be steady money. I said, go back to them and ask them on this contract thing if I will have any role approval. Mm-hmm. And so they went back to Monique James and the thing and said, would there be any role approval? And their answer, they came back and they said, no, contract player has no role approval. He does whatever roles we want him to do. And so I said to Ted, and Ted said to me, Ted said, well, I said, so that means that they want me to be a doorman. I'm a doorman. They want me to be a waiter. I'm a waiter. And he said, yeah. And I said, I don't want to do that. So I didn't become a contract player.
I respect you for that, and I thank you so much for coming on today, Jordan. This has been a tremendous honor. Real quick, your book, The Life of a Blue Collar Actor, it's available on Amazon and your website.
Yeah, let's tell the people it's available on bookbaby.com or Bookbaby Bookshop.
And your GoFundMe is available where?
Say that again?
Your GoFundMe that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, that's a thing, and they just go online to GoFundMe, and mine is you go on there, it's Jordan Rhodes, and it's help a New York actor and his wife, help an actor and his wife escape New York. That's the GoFundMe. And Tommy, thank you for that plug. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And where can people listen to you on the radio?
That would be Wednesdays from 9:30. Now, of course, I have one friend lives out there in California that called me up the first morning of the show, and he's a musician friend of mine. He scored a couple of things for me, and his name is Pat Anthony. And he called me up and said he'd heard the show, and I looked at the clock and I said, gosh, because it was like, he turned it on at 6:30. You got to be 6:30 out there to do it. I said, Pat, what are you doing getting up at 6:30? He said, I want to hear the show. I said, catch it on a rerun. but people, yeah, they can go to talk945.com, and it's On the Road Again with Jordan Rhodes, and they'll hear my little segment, but it's just Wednesdays, on Wednesdays from 9:30 to 10. And it's conservative, so if they happen to be liberals, they probably won't like what I have to say.
I hate to disappoint you, Jordan. I won't be listening.
Okay, Johnny.
Jordan,
I appreciate it. At least you're a liberal like Leo Penn was. I can talk to.
Yes. Exactly.
Here in New York, we don't have many liberals we can talk to.
Exactly. You have a great day, sir. Be safe out there.
Tommy, thank you very much. A pleasure doing your show.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye. Well, there you have it. Jordan Rhodes. Ain't he a cool dude? Oh, that was a Great conversation. I could listen to him talk all day. And even though we don't agree politically, oh my God, he's a nice man and great stories about old Hollywood there. Well, until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying there's no shame in living in the past because the present sucks. Later, dudes!